Today we will find common denominators to make comparisons. Remember that when comparing two fractions that have the same denominators, all you're really looking at is the numerators. In this case, we're comparing 2/5 with 4/5. They have the same denominator, which is 5. That means their wholes are broken into 5 parts. 2/5 has a numerator of 2, and 4/5 has a numerator of 4. Because the denominators are the same, all you need to compare are the numerators. Therefore, we know 4/5 is greater. If we look at it on a number line, we'll see that 4/5 is further to the right than 2/5 on the number line. We know that the further you are to the right, the greater the value. And the more you move to the left, the lesser the value. Remember, we are comparing fractions with common denominators in this problem. But what we're going over today is comparing fractions with unlike denominators. Here we have 4/5 and 7/8. They are not equal. The denominators are not equal. So what do we do? Well, there's a few steps. First, you need to find equivalent fractions with common denominators. In other words, we need to find an equivalent fraction to 4/5 and find an equivalent fraction to 7/8 where both those equivalent fractions share a common denominator. Well, how do you find a common denominator? That's easy. Look at the two denominators we have now, 5 and 8. All we need to do is find a common multiple for our denominators that we have now. So what's a common multiple for 5 and 8? The easiest way to find a common multiple of two numbers is to multiply those two numbers. Multiply 5 times 8 and you will find 40. That is a common multiple of the factors 5 and 8. Our new denominator for our equivalent fractions will be 40. Let's use the multiplication strategy to find our equivalent fractions for 4/5 and 7/8. Let's start with 4/5. To get the denominator 40 from the denominator 5, we have to multiply by 8. 5 times 8 equals 40. Whatever we multiply our denominator by, we now have to multiply our numerator by. So, 4 times 8 will find our new numerator. Let's look at 7/8. To get from our denominator of 8 to our denominator of 40, we must multiply by 5. Therefore, we need to multiply our numerator of 7 times 5. This gives us 32/40, which is equivalent to 4/5, and 35/40, which is equivalent to 7/8. Now that we have common denominators in our fractions, we can compare them. 4/5 is less than 7/8. Let's try another one. Compare the fractions 2/3 and 5/7. At first glance, you'll see that the denominators are not the same. 2/3 has a unit fraction of thirds, and 5/7 has a unit fraction of sevenths. Our two denominators are 3 and 7. We need to look for equivalent fractions in order to find a common denominator. So, we need to find a common multiple of 3 and 7. So we're going to take our two denominators, 3 and 7, and find a common multiple. And we know how to do that. We're going to multiply 3 times 7, which gives us 21. Now we'll find our equivalent fractions to 2/3 and 5/7. Our new denominator is 21. Now, just walk through the multiplication steps in order to find equivalent fractions. Start with 5/7. We started with the denominator of 7 and multiplied it by 3 to get a new denominator of 21. Therefore, we must multiply the numerator times 3, which gives us a new numerator of 15. Now for 2/3. We multiplied the denominator times 7, which gave us our new denominator of 21. We must multiply our numerator times 7, 2 times 7, to find our new numerator of 14. Now that we have equivalent fractions with a common denominator, we can compare 2/3 and 5/7. 2/3 is less than 5/7. Let's try one more. Compare 8/11 and 2/3. Again, our denominators are not the same. 8/11 has a denominator of 11, and 2/3 has a denominator of 3. Let's find a common multiple of 11 and 3. Multiply 3 times 11. The product is 33. Now that we have a common multiple, we can find equivalent fractions for 8/11 and 2/3 with our new denominator of 33. Let's start with 8/11. Our denominator 11 multiplied by 3 gives us our new denominator of 33. Our numerator of 8 is also multiplied by 3, giving us a new numerator of 24. For 2/3, we multiplied both the numerator and denominator by 11. That gives us a new fraction of 22 over 33. We can now compare these fractions because they now have common denominators. We see that 8/11 is greater than 2/3 because we compared 24 over 33 to 22 over 33. We found that 24 over 33 was greater than 22 over 33. Therefore, 8/11 is greater than 2/3. You're probably wondering to yourself, what's the point of all this? Finding common denominators helps us to compare fractions. As you grow older, you'll see that you're constantly comparing fractions with different denominators in food, money, the distance something travels, the time something takes, the capacity of a container. All of these things use fractions, and sometimes they don't have the same denominator, so they're going to be hard to compare. Your ability to change the denominators in order to have fractions with common denominators will help you compare them more easily. That's it for today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you again soon.